Now let's talk about a little bit more about the concept of building topic clusters in general. So first and foremost, I think about it as they're guidelines, they're not rules. Like we've already talked about the fact that you don't need to do all these different things to build a topic cluster. You have this general framework that's almost like a fractal where you can zoom in and out of, and you can use them for individual posts, for pillar pages, for entire categories. And then the other idea here is when you're building your clusters, think about the customer's journey at all times. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the idea that we're just talking about keywords and forget about the themes and the intentions that the user has. And so always want to think about, when I'm building this cluster, did I represent the entire funnel? Do I have keywords about the discovery stage and the consideration phase and the purchase phase? And then finally, don't drown in the details. That's an important one. I want to make sure that when we're thinking about all these different pieces of it, it's easy to focus on like the checklist, or did I add enough internal links, or did I add too many links? Those are important, but at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that you have the complete user journey mapped out and linked together, so that walk in their shoes. If you're a user and you come to this page, think about the questions they're going to have as they read your content, and then do you have something to offer them as a next step? And the other part about building topic clusters is not to think about it as a single set of rules that applies to everybody. You have to think about your own SEO strategy. Are you going to target the competitive keywords, the high volume keywords, or are you targeting simpler, lower competition keywords? I mean, it requires an investment to do the higher volume keywords. Is your content strategy going to focus entirely on trying to rank as many keywords as you can around a massive guide, which again is a huge investment? It's a lot more content. There's a lot of, you have to build a lot of backlinks to get something like that to rank against competitors. Or are you going to go after more streamlined, have a wider base to your content? And then a part of that as well, are you going to invest in backlinks? Are you going to build homepage links or direct links to either your pillar or category pages, or to individual pieces of content? Because that's an important piece of the strategy as well. And you can't really build a topic cluster without knowing these questions first. You have to answer these before you move on to actually building it. So if we talk about organizing our keywords, first of all, I'll show you a visual next that'll make it a little bit clearer, but always use, when you're organizing your keywords in a spreadsheet, use hierarchical columns so that you have your keyword, and then you have the head term that all the keywords map to, and then you have your topic cluster that they roll into, and then maybe a category or a subcategory, so that everything kind of maps together. And you'll also want to have a column for your search volume, so that you can use some formulas to calculate all of the total keywords and the total volume per blog post, and then per cluster, and then maybe even per category, so that way you can really help prioritize how you're going to tackle writing them individually. I actually have a template that it's just a really simple template that I'll be sending around in an Excel sheet. We'll follow up with an email, so you can just kind of use that if you don't have one, and it lays all this out for you already, and it already has the formulas built in, so that if you start populating it with your keywords and your search volume, as you begin to map those to head terms and topic clusters, it'll automatically sum those up, so you'll have an idea of the total volume that you're working with for each one. But this is kind of the visual of how that would look in a spreadsheet. If you want to screenshot it, that's fine, but you'll, like I said, I will be sending an email around to following up. So a couple of guidelines, at least to think about when mapping keywords. First of all, I manually search them in Google. I mean, I know if you've got millions of keywords, that's not going to happen. If you've got 10,000 keywords, that's not going to happen. But I always think about this as like, we figure out our huge, massive keyword universe first. Here's everything that we care about. And then from there, when we're going to be writing content, that's when I like the idea of at least manually doing it if I have a smaller set of 100 or a few hundred at first, or as a follow-up to using a grouping tool, like we'll talk about later. If you do have a few thousand and you just don't have time, you don't have the resources, you want to manually group them, or you want to use a tool to group them, then that's a great way to chop through it quickly. And then I run a manual check just to make sure it does line up with our SEO strategy. So when you're searching the keywords, then you want to kind of take a look at the SERP and see. I've got an example in the next slide of, is there one search option? Does Google return the same essential content for the keywords, or are there different choices that you have to make in order to group the keywords? And when there are different choices, I always want to make sure that you're aligning with the search intent behind them. It doesn't work as well if you group keywords that have mixed search intent. Sometimes that's going to happen. It's rare, but I mean, I'm not going to rule it out, that sometimes you'll have something that starts off with what is X and then how to do X, and they're actually part of the same piece of content. That does happen. Just pay attention to that so that you're not accidentally grouping too many keywords with mixed intents, because Google's looking for that intent. And then as a rule of thumb, I tend to group more keywords together to make for a single blog post. And then if I'm not ranking for some of those keywords that are maybe sort of almost fit, but I included them anyways, if you find that after a couple months that you're not ranking for some of those, then break it out and write a new piece of content for it. I think that's a better approach than if you start off by writing 10 different pieces of content that should have been connected together. Then nothing's going to rank. You're cannibalizing and confusing Google. It's better off to say, all right, well, here's this content. It ranks really well for a whole lot of stuff, but this particular set aren't ranking. So we need a new piece of content. Also saves you a little bit of money than creating content and then throwing it away. So here's an example from that of keyword grouping from the Birdie case study that we had looked at previously. So this keyword, do belly button piercings hurt. If you look at that, you're going to see there's a lot of, this is the top 10. You see a lot of content that's related to the pain side. And then there's also some ultimate guides that are ranking in here as well. So you would have to decide, do I want to write, the massive ultimate guide, or do I want to target the easier, slightly lower volume, more intent driven, does this hurt? And that's going to, in order to answer that question, you need to go back to what's your SEO strategy? Do you want to invest in the guide? Do you want to invest in link building? Do you want to invest in the other ones? And here's another example. Birdie, again, has the same guide, ranks for this, but there's other content that targets the cost factor. So you have to make that decision. It's like a tree. Am I going to do the guide, or am I going to do the cost? You can lump them together. And then if you found that, hey, we're not ranking very well for these, let's break it out and do a separate one. And this is kind of like the example of a side-by-side. There's some, you could write the one post on one hand, or you could go straight in and write the ultimate guide in the center that ranks for all of them. And Birdie does that approach very well across all of its. So, this is kind of like that. Do you still want to write the ultimate guide? We've talked about, we know some of the content that tends to rank for these really well. A lot of those times, those are very powerful domains, and so you have to take that into account. What are the pros and cons of creating the ultimate guide? Guides tend to earn a lot of links. Easy, maybe you have to go out and reach out, but people tend to like to link to those. They also rank for a lot of keywords, and they work really well for pillar pages because they tend to sort of skim across the surface of things and then link out. But what are the cons of creating these types of things? Giant pieces of content tend to be too broad sometimes. If you choose a head term that just is like marketing, for example, right, and you try to make a 50,000 word blog post about marketing, it's just going to be way too broad, tend to be too long if you're not careful. And if you go too deep on things that you've also created subtopics for, then you'll end up cannibalizing your ranking.
Now, if you liked this Clearscope webinar snippet, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more great tips and strategies from the industry's best SEOs and content marketers. Make sure to check out the Clearscope YouTube channel for more great content.